Hi everyone. So what we're looking at in this presentation are all the different components of planning. So how to plan your sessions or your seasons or your activities. So the first thing we're going to look at are the learning outcomes for the evening. So first thing we want to see is, why is it important to plan? What are the benefits of planning, or why mightn't you plan, or why would you plan? The second thing we're going to look at then are factors that affect the planning of a session. So you're sitting down the night before a session or an hour before your training session, and you're thinking about, what am I thinking is going to affect the planning of my session? So we'll look at a number of different factors as well. Third thing we're going to look at then is how to plan an activity and all the variations of activities that we can do and how different things affect the activity. How to plan a session as well, and then finally how to plan a season. So all the components that we'll be looking at training over the course of the year with different age groups. So the first thing we're looking at is, why is it important to plan? So when I was sitting down trying to organise this presentation, I was thinking about loads of different, I could have went about it so many different ways. And I was trying to look at probably things that I've been looking at or studying over the last year or two or three. And one coach that popped up a number of times was John Wooden, so I've been looking into him a good bit. He's one of the most well-renowned coaches in the whole world. He's passed away about 10 years now, but he would have coached basketball in a college setting over in America, so he was a basketball coach. And what made him so well-renowned is that he put the individual first before teaching of the sport. But then the side effect of his coaching ability was that they had won 10 national championships in America in 12 years, and he won 7 back-to-back. So that would be the comparative to Sigerson or Fitzgibbon in an Irish college setting. So everyone knows how difficult that would be, because you've got a constant rollover of teams or in players. So how he did that, I've no idea. So he's kind of someone that I find very interesting. And when I was looking into him a good bit, one of the quotes he came up with regards planning and organising his sessions was, "Players will never know how long you spent planning a session, but they will know in a minute if you didn't." So this is a huge thing for us as coaches. If you want to have well set up and planned sessions, it makes everything so much easier for you. So I fully believe in this, that really good planning leads to good sessions. So it gives you the opportunity to really focus on the individual. Once you've got your planning set out and you're able to adapt it and be flexible, then you can really focus on the individual, and you're not worried about what are you going to do next or how to set up for the next activity. So really good planning, I think this is really important. And especially for coaches of under 6 and under 8s, not only will the players know if you haven't planned and it's very unorganised, the parents will spot it fairly fast as well. So they'll see a mile away if something is well thought out, or if it isn't. And if they want to bring their child to the pitch, be it hurling or football or camogie or ladies football, a huge thing for that is that the player knows that this is a good place for my child to be going to. The next person I was looking at when I was thinking about what is the importance of planning, so I was at the National Coaching Conference in January and the I Coach Kids Conference last summer, and one of the speakers that was at both of them was Chris Vanderhaeghe. He's a Belgian FA coach educator, and he really impressed me the 2 times that I seen him. And one of the things he said in one of the presentations was, "What you do is what you get. You must start with the end in sight." So regards your planning, yes, it's important to be planning session by session, but you also need to plan where you want your players to be. So I remember listening to Paddy Butler's national webinar 3 weeks ago, and he was saying in his club at Drum and Inch, at under 8 they want players to be able to use grip and swing by 8. At under 10 they're able to swing off their strong side from the hand, and then by 12 they're able to strike off left and right. So that's the end goal at them different ages. So you must plan with the end in sight. Where Chris Vanderhaeghe was coming from with this point of view was, he was looking at their national team about 20 years ago, and they were wondering how on earth their players weren't able to dribble. And then they went back to the start and they were looking at the way that the junior structure, the development structure was in the games program for the kids in Belgium at the time. And what they were noticing was that there were large sided games for the age of the players. So 6-year-olds were playing 5 aside, 7 and 8-year-olds were playing 8 aside, and so on. And they were saying that they were getting very few opportunities to actually have one-on-ones with opposition. So a knock-on effect of that then, in 20 years, they've seen that them players that had grown up, they weren't able to dribble the ball. So what he proposed, and it's changed now, at under 6 now they call them football festivals. They play 2 aside, and then at under 7 they play 3 aside, at under 8 they play 4 aside, and they don't play full 11 aside soccer in Belgium until the child is 14. So the big thing with this is, if we want to develop footballers or hurlers that are able to, that are really good in one-on-one situations, we need to provide that an opportunity for them in the training sessions we do and in the games we do. So small-sided games are a brilliant way to develop one-on-one attacking and defending abilities. Rather than trying to make the player fit into the adult game, they cut the cloth for the player so it fitted into the developmental age of the child. So the 6-year-old played 2 aside, the 7-year-old played 3 aside, and so on and so forth until they were 14. And then the last thing I think it's important to plan, and I know I said Paulie Butcher already, he looks at plan, do, review as something that's really important with regards to improving as a coach. So if you want to review your session afterwards on how it went, well, obviously the first thing you need to have done is you need to have planned it beforehand. So you can't review a session on something that you didn't kind of expect to do. So if you want to plan something and you say, I want to focus on this in my session, and then I review it afterwards and say, okay, well, it didn't really work on that, but it would have worked on something. So you need to review and critically reflect on yourself afterwards and saying, well, how could I have made that session better for what I wanted to achieve?
Michal, can I come in there as well?
Yep.
Can you go back to the second slide there? Your John Wooden and
there you go.
Yeah. Look, I just regards the first one, about players knowing in it very, very quickly whether your session is planned or not. Okay, one of the challenges you will experience as a coach, if you're over children, is boredom, lack of attention, maybe lack of discipline. If it's teenagers, maybe challenging coaches. Your credibility, you get great credibility, particularly with teenagers, if they come down and they see that your session is planned out, laid out, and there's a flow to it. In other words, there's no idleness, there's no waiting while the coach runs off and puts down the cones for the next drill or the next activity. So you as a coach get credibility from your players when they say, okay, you put time into this, you're obviously at home thinking about what you're doing. So then you gain respect from the players you're dealing with. Okay, for children, idleness, boredom comes in there when you're having to go around and set up your cones and set up the next activity. So if you've got it planned, particularly with children, the session flows. What you find is you start to relax more. The players are more engaged. So these things can help you just to run your sessions and gain credibility from the group of players that you're in charge of. As for the second one there about starting with something with an end in sight, what we don't want to end up with our teenage players is, when they come to 18 or 19, is a bigger, faster, stronger version of what they were at 11, 12, 13. Okay, it's hugely important that we talk about bilateral players being able to play off left and right, good decision makers, good team players. So even though you might be over under 14s for 2 years, we are always looking down the road to make sure that these players advance into our adult teams with the capabilities and the skills to flourish and to help our adult teams. Okay, so a big thing there is that we don't end up with just more athletic and stronger, physically stronger players at 18 and 19 than what they were at 14. And that's always the long-term goal, is that we're trying to produce players that can go on and express themselves for our adult teams, or when they go to colleges or where they play for inter-county, that the management teams that have them, these are flexible, talented players that they can use and move around the pitch and play in different positions. Okay, just wanted to add that to what Michal added there.
So when I was putting this presentation together, I was trying to think about all the different factors that would be there for different age groups. So a lot of them have been said already. So we have looked at, I know a number of you have said players. So the big thing with regards to players is there's a huge difference between a training session for 10 or 12 kids and a training session that could have 30 to 35 or 40 kids. So knowing how many players you're going to have is crucial as well. The playing area, so I know Dermot and Donald said space is something that they look at when they're trying to organise. If you're looking at, say, clubs that might be dual clubs, or might have one pitch, and you might have multiple teams needing to train on the same evening, you as a coach, the amount of space on the field that you're going to have to train on is going to determine what you're able to do. So I suppose the example I take for this is that if you had an under 14s team and a minor team training on the same night on a Tuesday, one team might be from 7 to 8 and the other team might be half 7 to half 8.
both coaches need to know that they're only going to have half the pitch if there's only one pitch available for half of the session. So then they need to plan their session for that half an hour accordingly as well, which then means that they need to be in communicating with the other coaches in their group. I know we said as well the number of coaches or selectors. So a big thing when if you're lucky enough to have plenty of assistant coaches or helpers with a group of players, it's really important that everyone is contributing to the session as well. So trying to, within your plan, and trying to figure out how can I incorporate coaches. Do I give them a number of players each? Do I give them a station? How do you work about having jobs for your assistant coaches? Your pitch conditions as well. So especially say for January, February, March time, under 14 hurling or under 16 football, it's really important that when the pitches are maybe aren't in as good as nick as possible, it's probably important to keep them in whatever shape they are. So you need to be able to plan and organise your session that you're not making, so you're not digging up the field when it would be soft and bad weather. Another thing to consider then for your 14, 16, or minor teams, I know John was saying about always looking down the line when games are coming up as well. Does that affect what you're going to be working on? So are you working on the same thing 3 months before a match as you would be the night before a match? So being able to adjust that as well. Another thing to consider for teams, especially at teenager level, is to be considerate of how many teams they could be involved in. There could be teams that are players that are playing with football, hurling, soccer. They could be playing other sports as well, other activities. They could be playing a year above themselves, so you could have a 14-year-old playing 15s or under 16 as well. Most kids will be playing with their school. Some kids will be playing with their development squads. So to be conscious that some players could be playing on an awful lot of teams and to be aware of that as well is really important. As Sean was saying then, the weather. I was listening to Stuart Lancaster on Tuesday evening and talking about, he was doing a national webinar on the e-learning site, and he was talking about the weather when sometimes, as the way Ireland is, as we all know, the weather can be really poor. So what he said is when the weather can be poor, can you explain the session to the players 5 or 10 minutes before the session in the dressing room, so you don't have players standing up in the cold and wet and wind when they could be just transitioning quickly from one activity to the next. Another thing to be considering is the time in the season. So like we were saying, if we had a game coming up, it's probably the biggest example for adult teams. They come back in January, February time, they could do 2 or 3 months of a lot of physical conditioning work, and then come June, July, August, they'll do a lot of games-based coaching, working on technical and tactical parts of the game, and then their team play. So it's really important that knowing that the same session in January isn't possibly what you do in July or August. So knowing how does the time of season affect what you're going to do. A few of us said about equipment. So the big thing about equipment is that it needs to be age appropriate for everyone. So if you're with your under 8s, it's really important that they have their first touch football or slitter, and then you can move up with regards to the age. So it's appropriate to the group you're dealing with. Another thing with equipment is it's really important is if you have someone in charge of equipment, you need to make sure that they're reliable, that it's going to be there, and if it isn't, you need to make sure that you might have to take hold of it yourself, that it will be. And then the next one then we're looking at is ability level. So something that I probably asked on every single coaching course or workshop is how do you try and deal with the different ability level of players. So you could have a player that really needs to be challenged, and then other players really need to be assisted. So how do I plan that in my session that I can make it a little bit harder for the children that are finding it a bit easy, and how can I make it a little bit easier for the child that might be struggling? So that's something that's really important, I believe in as well. And then kind of following on from that, then you could have a big age difference between the group of kids you're coaching. So I know myself, I coach our under 12 football team in Kilfenora, Liscannor and Cusicks, and we have our under 12s, we've got 9, 10, 11 and 12 year olds within the team. So it's really important for me in order for them to have an enjoyable experience, is that I don't ever end up having like all the 9s playing against all the 12s. So being conscious of the fact that knowing which are the age groups of the players and trying to make sure that you're making the teams as fair as possible and even them out, and that kind of works for ability level as well. So the next thing we're going to look at then is how to plan an activity.
Michal, can I come back in there again, the last slide?
Yep.
Okay, look, you can see, guys, there's a lot of things there that are outside of your control, okay, like the weather, your playing area that's available to you, okay, at the time of the season. But one thing you have control of is what you do with your players. Okay, Michal mentioned there that he's involved with, maybe what we would consider a small club, and a lot of West Clare clubs now, their numbers are really small. But where you go into Ennis and around that area, you have clubs with huge numbers of players coming down to the field looking to be coached. And that's a real challenge for coaches with those type of numbers coming in the gate. So if you're at training and you have 36 players coming into you, it's a huge challenge for coaches to coach those players and make sure that they're getting the right attention, getting the right activities. And so the importance, if we try to figure out the importance of small-sided games, 4v4, 5v5, even 3v3, okay, where all those players are kept active. 7, 8, 9-minute games, moving on into different games, different conditions that challenge different skills. But the one thing we can control, right, whether we have small numbers or big numbers, is what we do with them. And the huge advantage we have with small-sided games, and where we change the conditions. Okay, Michal, thanks.
So the next thing we're going to look at then is one of the best books I've read so far. It's called the Carver Coaching Framework, and it's called about coaching children in sport. And I took an awful lot away from it, but there's definitely a number of things that have stood out for me from it, and two of them are anagrams. So one of them is WALT. So we are learning to. So you're being really specific on what you want to learn. So you're giving context to the players. We are learning to strike off left and right, so we have more options when we're playing a game. We are learning to kick with left and right, so that we have more options when we're playing the game. So I think that's a really good way to be able to explain to the players why we are learning a skill, and then how does that transfer back into our game. And then the other one then is WILF. So what I'm looking for. So you as a coach, what is it you're looking for? So you're observing. You're trying to see what it is the players can and can't do technically or tactically, and you're saying, okay, I'm looking for this, and this is what I want to be seeing. So with regards to session aim or activity aim or focus, one thing I fundamentally believe in is that every single activity, either be it a drill or a game, will work on something. But the thing for you as a coach is you need to know that is the activity that you have designed working on what you want it to work on. So going back to Paddy talking about plan, do, and review, you start your session and you're saying, okay, I want this activity to work on long striking or kicking, and then you review it afterwards and you think, well, did it work? Did it do what I intended it to work on? So say if we'll take long striking or kicking for example, if we played a 5-on-5 on 6-on-6 game, if you did that in a 30-meter square grid, you won't give the opportunity to the players to achieve what you want. Now, it will work on something, so because the area is small, you will end up working on intensity and tackling and hooking and blocking, but you mightn't end up with what you intended to. So the plan, do, review is crucial in order to make sure that you get what you wanted at the end of it. The other thing to consider then when you're planning an activity is the intensity you want the activity to be at and how many repetitions you want the players to get. So likewise, when you're trying to think about, I want this to work on whatever skill it is, you have to try and figure out how many repetitions are the players going to get the way the activity is set up. So from the introduction to Gaelic games, it's the new coaching course that was due to start in February, but the way things are, it'll be whenever we go back, I suppose. It used to be the STEP model, so space, time, task, equipment, personnel. So the STEPper model stands for space, time, equipment, players, and rules. So what we're going to look at them all in a bit more detail now as well. So the first one we're going to look at is space. So the big thing with space is, like we were saying when we're factoring in how much space we're going to have for our session, we also need to consider how much space does each activity going to need as well. So the big thing with space is, like we were saying with our long strike and our long kicking, we need to have the space set up so that it's able to it gives the opportunities to the players to achieve what you want the activity to work on. So you can make the space bigger or smaller depending on what you want it to work on. The next thing then we're looking at is time. So the huge thing with time is we want how much time can we do an activity for while keeping the intensity in the activity. So the example I give for this, when we started back with the under 14 development squad in January, we started out with the players and we explained to them, we're only going to go for 3.5 minutes. We're playing 5-on-5 or 6-on-6, and it was a conditioned game with rules and scores. And we were saying, and then we asked them, why do you think we're only playing for 3.5 minutes? And they said we wanted to work hard for as long as we were able, and then we'd take a little break. So we did 5 or 6 rounds of that, and then we did transition. So we three rotations of squads. So the big thing here is we want to keep the activity as intense as possible without the effort going down. So that's something you need to consider when you're planning your activities. Another thing, as we've come across already, is our equipment. So what have you got is the most important thing when you're looking at equipment, and is it age appropriate for your players? And then the next thing then we need to consider then is the type of players, or who are the players that we're dealing with. And then with regards to the activity, how many players do I need for the activity to work? So a big thing here is being adaptable. We have 20 players normally at training. If 15 turn up, does that completely affect how my session is going to look? If 25 turn up, will it completely change how my session is going to run? So the big thing with coaching is being flexible and adaptable. So yes, it's really, really important to have a plan set out, but then have you also kind of contingency plans in place for things that you might have occurred that weren't expected. And then the last thing we're going to look at then is regards rules. So the phrase here, I was lucky enough to have 2 presentations from Paul Kinnerk at the start of the year, one in college and one with work. And one of the things he said was constrained to afford. So if you're designing an activity, and especially games-based coaching, you really want to emphasize the desired behaviours you want them to do. So if you're looking at, especially we go back to our under 14 development squad, we really wanted them to work on jab lifting first time on the run rather than stopping and roll lifting, and we really wanted them to work on catching the ball and taking it in their hand first time rather than taking it on the hurling. So with regards to the rules, with the game we set up, we had a scoring system with positive scores for the good behaviours we wanted, and then also the next weeks after that. So once we had identified with them what we want them to do, then we looked at how can we do negative scores for the behaviours we don't want to see. So then we started doing negative points, so -2 or 3 points for if someone ran to a ball and should have jab lift on the run and stopped to roll lift, we took 2 points away from their team. And then the same thing, if a ball was struck within catching distance of or within the where they're able to catch the ball and they took it on their hurley instead of catching it, we took points away for that. Similar thing for football then. If you do with football, you could give skill, or you could give points for a pass that's caught with 1 bounce or better. So a good accurate kick pass, you can do the exact same scoring system then. So the next thing we're going to look at now is games and drills. What it is you think are the benefits and the negatives of each. So generally what you're looking at is that the pros of one are going to be the cons of the other. So what we've come up with is one of the benefits of games are they're similar to a match. You can apply the skills or show off the skills that you've learnt, and you can show that you're improving your skills. Then on the negative side of games, a few of us have said they can be dominated by a few players, and similar then some players can miss out. And then with our drills, our benefits of drills, they can develop skill, so they're really good at isolating a specific skill and isolating them. They are good for structure, and they get lots of touches as well. One of the cons of drills then is they might get repetitive and players might find them boring. So going back to our stepper model, it's really important to figure out how much time can I do them without getting bored, and then they're not optimized so that they're not relevant. They're not specifically relevant to the game that they're going to be playing.
Look, there was a lot of good answers coming in there from the coaches that are tuned in. But one of the I suppose the biggest challenge for coaches going down to the field when they're training is to have the confidence in what you're about to deliver with your players. And if you have that confidence when you're going down, you're calm, you're relaxed. What you find is your session flow, but you're also able for things that may go wrong or may pop up during the training session. Okay, and when we go down, can we stand over what we're trying to get our players through or what we're trying to deliver? Okay, and I'm really in the side of games when it comes down for this. Okay, drills. When it comes to drills, you have, and it's important that every player that comes to the training field gets particularly with children, gets an opportunity to be successful. Okay, so putting a child into a game where they can't perform the skill or where there's lots of failure can be really damaging to a player. So things like that, that's where drills are really, really beneficial to a player that will struggle in a game. But the thing about drills is the game, whether of Gaelic football is always playing. It's chaotic. It's going on in front of you. It's going on behind you. It's going on your left and your right. And drills don't teach that. When we do drills, the players aren't in charge of the decision making. The coach blows the whistle. That's the drill. The next player goes when they receive a pass from the previous player. We hand pass in straight lines. We kick pass in straight lines. We run in straight lines. And yet the game is the opposite. The game is always left and right. You're changing direction. Okay, there's very little decision making in drills. You pass to who you're told to pass to. You pass when you get to the target. So drills don't teach that. With games, the player is constantly making decisions. Where do I go? When do I go? When do I time my run? Who do I pass to? Do I solo? Do I hop? Do I hand pass? Do I kick long? And games teach these things because there's a huge amount of opportunity for players to fail. And when we fail, we reflect on what we do. What did I do the last time? What did I see the last time? What will I do the next time? What worked? What didn't work? And drills don't teach that. Okay. Also in games, we like players to spread out, to go left, to go right, to go long, to go short, to give the player in possession multiple opportunities to make the game easier for them, to give the opposition multiple decisions on who we mark, where we mark. And drills don't teach them. Drills teach players to run up on top of one another. So yes, drills have a part to play, particularly in repetition of a drill, but it really is limited when it comes to your team play, your decision making, practicing the skills under pressure. Drills don't provide that position. So can we get down to the field and can we deliver training sessions where we isolate particular skills? So for example, if in Gaelic football, if you want to develop kick passing, let's remove every other skill. No hand pass, no hop, no solo. Now every player, when they get the ball, they have to kick it. So we're developing kicking. We're also now having to develop a side step because there's going to be an opposition sometimes when you get to football. You're going to see when you kick it, can someone catch it? Is their first touch there? Can they make the right run? Can they learn to make the right run? Can they get onto their weaker side? So not only are they practicing kicking, they're now starting to show you other areas where they're deficient in. So you've got a team, yes, they're all kicking, but they're all running towards one another, and they're all running towards the ball. So their movement needs to be worked on. Okay. The one thing, no matter whether you're taking a minor team or an under 16 team, all the players are enthusiastic. They all try really, really hard to give you everything, but can we get them to work in a smarter way that promotes team play and gives them more time on the ball and gives them an opportunity to express themselves? So games do this, okay, and small-sided games. Can we get to the stage when we're going down to the field and we're doing a series of 4 10-minute games, 5v5, 4v4, where different conditions are in every game that promote different skills, and isolate the skill that you want to develop on that particular evening, or isolate the skill that you want to develop in that 8-minute section before you move on to a different game. So games are so advantaged to that. Okay, even when you get down to nursery, 2v2, let them run 10 steps and throw the ball. Okay, let them run 10 steps before kicking it. Okay, drills, yes, it's important to get that balance right so that the player that's struggling in a game. So, for example, if you have a player, and I think one of the questions that came up there, that the strong players dominate. Okay, so let's go into drills where they don't dominate. If you can spot the problem, you're coaching. If you can spot the problem, you can come up with a solution. If you can't spot the problem, then we're in trouble. So if you can spot that the strong player is dominating in a game, and it's easy to prevent that by going to a drill, the real challenge is to stay with the game. And can we get, without punishing the dominant player, can we get the other players involved? So I go back to using Gaelic football again, and you can use the same conditions in hurling. You can't pass the ball back to the same player that get you the pass. So if you have a dominant player, normally what happens there, they take the return pass, they take the return pass. Usually if you've got two dominant players, they'll pass to one another. Okay, so if you bring in a condition where they can pass the ball back to the same player, that takes the dominant player out of it for that particular pass. No two hand passes in a row. Okay, so now the strong player gives a hand pass, he can't receive a hand pass. So you're now challenging the next player to develop skills that aren't being challenged in a normal situation. And what you're going to see is with every condition you bring in, other problems will be exposed. So we go back to the example of no two hand passes in a row. And you can use this game right down to under eights. Okay? The dominant player will give a hand pass, and the next player will give a 2-yard kick pass back. So you now have a different problem. So can you come up with a solution for that? Can you come up with a solution where every kick pass has to be 5 meters? Or if you're doing with a minor team, 15, 20 meters. That takes the dominant player completely out of the next play. So games are brilliant. They allow for so much failure, so much reflection, and challenge players to work on their own game. And the challenge is for you to get the condition to isolate the skill that you want to coach and to use those. And yes, there is a place for drills, but as they get older, we've said it before, it was mentioned earlier, boredom. And when players get bored, they're not as engaged. They tune out, and other things start to happen. Okay, so I'm a big believer in small-sided games, different conditions for every game, and this is where the challenge is for you as a coach to build up your repertoire of games that isolate the particular skill that you want to run, or you want them to develop. Okay, and you have to be persistent and you have to be consistent with what you're trying to coach. This won't happen straight away. Okay, so that's the challenge for you as a coach, to build up your repertoire of games. And a lot of sessions, you'll see a game that looks attractive to you, players are engaged, but is it actually coaching and developing the skills that are necessary for them to play? Okay, so rather than just running a training session, are you developing skills, whether it be team play, a technical skill, decision making, movement, that they can transfer to a match when they're playing? Okay.
So taking it from Paul Connerty again, what we'd seen, he basically says the 4 coaches look at they fit into one of 4 different boxes. So the first one, what he said was, coaches, they have little use of games, and at the end of a session they use them as a reward. So they'd be very drill based, they'd be very prescriptive at telling the players where to go and when to go and how to do it. The next level then would be, there would be some use of games, but the games have no purpose. So it's kind of a game for the sake of having a game. So there's no constraints, there's nothing specific. So going back to our stepper model with the rules, there's no incentivizing of good behaviours and disincentivizing of behaviours you wouldn't like to see as well. Next step then is players that are predominantly use their games, but the constraints are without purpose. So the example I'll take for this is if you were playing a game and say you wanted to work on moving the ball as fast as possible, so be it football or hurling, if you want to move as fast as possible, but the constraint on the game is you must play the ball twice. So if you wanted players to play the ball twice, that means that they're not moving the ball as quick as possible. So yes, there is a constraint on the game, but it's not actually working on what you wanted to work on. And then the last step then would be predominantly used games have a big library of games that you can use. So have a variety of games that you can change all the time and have purposeful constraints. So if I go back to the constraint of you must play the ball twice before you pass it on, that would be a constraint that would be good to get players used to being comfortable on the ball. But then similarly, the purposeful constraint for wanting to move the ball quickly would be you have to move the ball within 4 steps. So that's just something to be considered as well. So the next step we wanted to look at is ball learning is, so it's a theory with regards to complex learning theory, and it's basically saying how people learn. And they said the best way that people learn is learning should be active, it should be social, and it should have interpretation involved with it. So we're going to look at them each individually. So the first one is active. So questioning and engaging the learner to stimulate reflection. So your questioning needs to be relevant to the age of the player. So the question you might ask an 8-year-old wouldn't be the same question you'd ask an 18-year-old. So if I'm questioning an 8-year-old, it would be very technical, and you might be saying, if you're soloing in football, which way does your toe point when you're trying to solo? And they might say, up to my nose. Or if you're soloing in hurling, where do you hold the hurley when you're trying to solo? And they say, nice and short with my tongue towards the boss. So little coaching points that are very easy for players to know. And then for our older players, 14, 16s, minors, you can go into the tactical side of the game then with questioning them. So who did you pass to there? Why did you pass to Jim and not John? If you had the same situation again, would you do the same thing, or would you do something different? So really trying to get a deep level of reflection within the player, so you're trying to raise their awareness and make them more aware of what they did or what they would do again. The next level then with regard to complex learning theory is it needs to be social. So you want to give an opportunity to discuss and debate tactics with coaches and teammates. So one way I like to do this is trying to get the players to have a voice. So if I picked 2 teams, so if we had 20 at training, if you had 2 teams of 10 aside, or if you had 2 5-a-side games, you'd explain the rules and the scoring system from the start, and then you'd give them 30 seconds or a minute, and you're saying, okay, come up with a tactic of how you're going to beat that team, the other team, with the rules that we set out, and come up with your own tactics. So giving them their own voice and a kind of autonomy to them as well. And then the last step then is interpretation. So the big thing here is that there's no right way to do anything. There's probably a number of different ways to do something. So everyone's opinion is valued. So you provide a supportive environment where everyone can voice their opinion, and then they're encouraged to come forward with ideas. Okay. So some of the best ideas I've ever got from coaching have probably come from children, and you're thinking, well, God, I never would have thought of it that way. But kids think like kids, and adults think like adults. So if we're trying to coach children, it's probably a good idea to think about how they think about it as well. So before we look at, I suppose the next thing we want to see is just to show you that a lot of the stuff we said already in the public chat, but what's out there in the moment with regards to research in games-based coaching and drills-based coaching is the benefits of games-based coaching is it's a really good way of increasing decision making. So the big thing for us as coaches is we can't play for the players. We need to make them really good decision makers and tactically aware, so that they're able to play and make the decision when it happens for them on the pitch. So we have to prepare them in a way that's going to make them better able to do that. Kids also find it more fun and enjoyable playing games. So like John was saying earlier, the small-sided games are a fantastic way of getting younger kids loads of touches on the ball, plenty of repetitions, and going back to our Belgian FA, starting with our small-sided games where they're learning how to dribble. If you play small-sided games with younger kids, they're learning how to attack and defend one-on-one situations more often. There is limited research support for skill execution improvement. So with regards to games-based coaching, there's limited research or limited support for it to be improving the technical skills, but it doesn't disimprove them. So it doesn't make them better, but it doesn't make them worse. The benefits in the drills in regards to research is that, like we said, you're getting more repetitions and you're also getting a specific focus on a skill. So I suppose the big thing for us to take home from this, there's a place and a time for both. And the skill and the art of coaching is knowing when is the right time and place and which to work on at which time. So what I'd say is drills are a brilliant way to start, get kids repetitions and get them used to learning the technique and a skill. And then once they're able to do the technique or have a fair grasp of it, then how can you try and incorporate it into games is a good idea. So with regards then our skills, before we go into looking at planning a session, I'd really like to look at the stages of a skill. So this is another workshop that I went to, and it was actually a swimming workshop. Wayne Goldsmith, he's an Olympic swimming coach in Australia, and he did kind of I think they call it a seminar or a coaching clinic, sorry. And he was looking at the stages of a skill with regards to the front stroke or the backstroke or the butterfly in swimming. And I was thinking, geez, this is really relevant to all sports, let alone just swimming. So the first stage when you're teaching anyone how to learn anything is they need to learn how to do the skill. And then the next step you want them to be able to do is you want them to be able to master the skill. Now there's a huge difference between learning, never seeing the skill before, and then being able to master it. There's years of training and practice at home to be able to do this. So there's 4 steps in order to get from 1 to 2. So the first one is you're unconscious incompetent. So the player doesn't even know that they can't do it correctly. So the example I probably is best seeing this is the block in football or hurling. So you see players, they're turning their back on the ball, they're not looking at the block, and they're kind of shrinking into themselves, afraid of getting hit. So they don't even know they're not blocking, and they're not doing it correctly. So this is where the coach comes in and they do their job. So they're trying to raise the awareness of the player, and they're trying to make them know now that there's more to the skill than what they know themselves. So now they're aware that they can't do the skill, and this is when the coach really needs to support and help the child or the teenager so that they can practice and learn the coaching point of the skill, and then they can learn to be a conscious, competent player. So they're able to perform the skill, but they're also able to, it looks a bit rigid, and they're they're thinking about what they're doing all of the time. So they know the coaching points, they know how to do it, but they're thinking about it while they do it. And then the last level of then is the subconscious competence. So we want to get players from learning a skill to mastering a skill. So the subconscious competence is when someone looks really natural, can do it very easily and comfortably. So once players have mastered a skill, then we need to be able to challenge them. So how do we do that? There's 4 more steps, and the last one is being able to do it in competition. So the first one then is we want them to be able to do the skill at speed. So can I go to the ball as fast as I can with the ball coming at me as fast as it can, and can I do it the skill at speed? That is the biggest thing that we want every player to be able to do. Now we can't expect them to do it at speed if they aren't able to do the technical points of the skill first. The next one then is, are they able to do it when fatigued? So am I able to perform the skills the same in the first or second minute as I could in the 59th minute? So does my ability to perform skills drop later in the game when I get a bit tired? The next one then is looking at under pressure. So pressure doesn't have to be full on 100%. You can introduce pressure into your sessions by putting a time limit on activities and doing scores for time. So like say a wall ball test, how many strikes or kicks can you get off a wall in 30 seconds? I know it's all over Twitter and everything on the moment. Little skills challenges, and the pressure is time, but you can also have pressure as an opposition as well. And then the next one then is doing it consistently. So the example I give of this is doing it consistently is we're looking at who are the players that can do it all the time, every time. So like say for hurling example, you're looking at your Patrick Horgan, Peter Duggan, TJ Reid, they're hitting 10, 12 points every single day they go out. Football, you're looking Michael Murphy, Kieran Kilkenny, Dean Rock, people that are doing it consistently, and the players that do it consistently all the time are the ones that end up winning the All-Stars in the end. So then the final step of learning a skill is we want the players to be able to do it in the game where we want them to be able to shine and show off what they know. So your job as a coach, you're not expecting any player to be able to do anything in a game that they haven't done in training. So the 6 steps before step 7, that is what you have got control over, and that's where you can improve the players as a coach, and then you're basically letting them show off what they're able to do in step 7. With regards then the different ability and skill level, the real skill of a coach is being able to know how to assist and how to challenge a player. So some players might be on level 1 while other players in your group might be on level 3 or 4. So how can you plan in your session to make it more difficult for the player that needs to be challenged and be able to support and assist the player that needs a little bit of help? So looking at the little graphic on the right corner, so challenge and support, it's something that I seen on it was Instagram actually. It was a personal training page, and they were looking at when you're dealing with a client, you need to be able to challenge them, but you also need to be able to support them. So if we start down in the bottom left corner, if you've got low support and low challenge, you don't really care about the player or the athlete or the client. Then you've got high support on the right hand side, but you've got low challenge. So you're not pushing the child or the teenager to reach their full potential because you're not challenging them enough for the ability that they have. And the knock-on effect of that is that they're not going to learn as best they possibly could. So you're mollycoddling the child, you're really nice, but you're not actually you're not making them as best as they could be. The next step then is at the top left corner is it's too difficult. So the problem with too difficult would be is if you set a challenge that may be too difficult and you don't support them, so you don't observe, you don't explain, you don't encourage, you don't give feedback, it's very hard for the child to improve because you've set them a challenge, but you haven't gave the support network behind it. So the top right corner is where we'd love to reach with every child or every person in our group. So trying to find that sweet spot for each player. So how much support do I need to give in order for the challenge that I've given? So looking at the 4 blue dots, we're all with teams, and we all know that everyone is going to be different. So within these 4 dots, they kind of represent where people are going to lie. Now they can move depending on what skill it is you're looking at. But say on the right hand side, some people may need an awful lot more support than others. So there are two blue spots on the right, whereas on the left hand side, some kids or teenagers might need an awful lot of support for the amount of challenge that you give them. And then similarly then for our challenge, our 2 blue dots on the top, some teenagers or kids might be well able to deal with failure. They're well able to be challenged, and they're comfortable with failing multiple times before they get something. And then other teenagers or children mightn't be able to react to the same amount of challenge. So they might need less challenge in order for them to have more chance of success. And then once they get that success, then you can increase the challenge a little bit more. So the next thing then I want to look at is, so that's looking at the different type of skills. So now we want to look at the planning a session. So another book that I've read was really brilliant as well. Wade Gilbert, it's called Coaching Better Every Season. So it breaks the season down into pre-season, in-season, and at post-season. So what he looks at is the in-season. The majority of the work in-season is planning and delivering sessions. And he basically broke down the planning of a session into 4 different areas. So the first one is purpose. So just like we were looking with the designing an activity, just like every activity needs a purpose or a focus or an aim, every session needs a purpose as well. Now you could have 2 or 3 or 4 purposes or aims in your session, but you must have one. So the big thing is you need to know that everything in your session has a reason for being there. And you go back to your plan, do, review again. You planned the session with a purpose, you did the session, and you reviewed it afterwards. Did the session do what you wanted it to, or did it not? And if not, why not? And then what can you change in the future? Okay? The next step then is the variety of engagement. So what he considers is the balance between free play and deliberate play. So this is the balance between how much games and how much drills do I do. So this may differ depending on the time of year, and it may differ on the age group you have. So I know I was talking about our under 12s I'm coaching at the moment. Well, not at the moment, before the lockdown. In a 60-minute session, I would do at least 30 minutes of games-based coaching. So that would be anything from 1-on-1s, 2-on-2s, 3-on-3s, backs and forwards, World Cup, first goal in, multi-balls in the game. So you could be playing a 7-on-7 or an 8-on-8 with 2 or 3 footballs in the game. So all different variations of games, I do at least 30 minutes in a session. And I do between half and 3/4 of the session would be that games-based. And then I'd be focusing on the other half or 1/4 would be my drills or my activities to work on my fundamental movement skills or my sport-specific skills, like say block, for example. That might be a skill that they really need to work on in isolation before we can try and bring it into a game. So just like I was saying about you can do the same 4-on-4 week after week, but the purpose of the activity could be changed. So if you did a 4-on-4 one week and you could focus on, you could give a skill point for a hook or a block. So that could be something that could be the purpose of that activity that week. But the exact same 4-on-4 the next week, you could be incentivizing scoring with your non-dominant side. So scoring a point with your left side or striking a point with your left side. So you can change the way the activity is designed depending on what you want it to work on. The next one then we want to look at then is competition within a session. So every child and every person are naturally competitive. So it's really, really important that we try and filter that. Competition is brilliant to have, and it's really good to filter that competitive edge in the right direction. So trying to get it in a way where you're trying to improve the players and them trying to improve themselves. So you want to increase the effort, and competition is a brilliant way to do this. So the 4 types of competition I see is me versus me. So we're seeing it all over Twitter and all over online at the moment. 30-second skills challenges, a minute skills challenges. So I get 10 in 30 seconds. I'm trying to beat my own score. I'm trying to get 11. The other one then is me versus you. So I've got 10. My friend has got 12. I want to beat my friend. Now we want to be really careful here with, especially with younger kids, having them competing against each other. I know competition is important, but we want to be careful that we're not knocking anyone's confidence, because some kids might be struggling as well. So it's really important to know that if someone gets 3, 4 is the best score in the world for them the next time as well. So just because someone is way ahead of another person, the me versus me, especially with your younger kids, is really, really important. Gaelic games are team sports, so being able to work in a team is really important too. So us versus us and us versus them. So with regards to us versus us, if we had two teams playing a 6-on-6, so red bibs against blue bibs, you play a game for 5 minutes and the score was 5-4. Us versus us, we could be saying, okay, next time we want to get 6 goals instead of 5, and then us versus them would be the red bibs would say, okay, we want to beat the other team the next time. Okay, so you can change the competition element of your session depending on how you want it to work. And then the last part that he had in the book was game speed. So trying to get the intensity of the session, and I know Stuart Lancaster was saying it on Tuesday night as well. When you're training, the intensity needs to be as high as you can, and then do really, really good work as quick as best you can. So trying to have game speed, so not sacrificing technique for speed, but you want to try and keep the intensity up as much as possible. So the challenge and the equipment needs to be age appropriate. So probably the best example that I have for this would be if you've got a 7-year-old that's soloing in hurling. If you're having them with soloing with a slitter, the speed of running is going to be so much lower than if they were doing with a beanbag or a beanball, because the challenge is probably too high. So if we want to get players that are soloing at speed, you need to change the equipment so that it's relevant to the child. The next thing we're going to look at before we look at planning a season, or what are the components of planning a season, are loads of different ideas that I've kind of jotted down and picked up along the line. So one of the things from is the sequencing of your session. So most of us probably would have grown up, you do a warm-up, you do a drill, you do another drill, you do another drill, and then you might play a game at the end of the session. That doesn't always have to be the way. So I know that when we had the presentation with Paul Kinnerk, he was saying that he generally we could start with a game and then go out of a game, do specific work, and then go back into the game to see that it changed how the game was playing. A buddy of mine, Mark O'Donnell, he was in Australia for the last year, he's coming back the weekend. I was really struggling with our under-12s at the start of last year. I found it really hard to get their attention when I was doing the deliberate practice work. So say, teaching how to do the jump and catch, or the block, or fundamental movement skills. So I was on to him and I was chatting to him for a good while, and I was talking about it, and I said, I'm really struggling with this, but Jesus, when we go into the matches, they're the best little kids in the world. And he said, why don't you try and start with a match one day and see how that goes? So the next Wednesday I was there at 5:30 for my training session at 6 o'clock, and I was like, okay, so I have my session planned. I'm going to start with my game, we're going to do 20 minutes of that, and then we're going to look at doing more technical skill-based stuff or fundamental stuff after that, and then we'll go into a game again. So very similar to Paul Kinnerk, you start with a game, do something specific, and then game again. So I started out in goals, 2 kids came, and I basically just kicked the ball out. They played one-on-one against each other, and they were trying to score goals or points on me. 3 or 4 more kids came. When 4 or 5 kids were there, whoever scored the goal or the point went in, and I just stepped out and I was just watching how they were going. I was getting their bibs on while they were arriving, so I was getting them set up to be starting their small-sided games. And then once there were 6 players at training, I had the pitches set up already, and we played 3-on-3s. So, and then kids started arriving. So we ended up with, I think it was 3-on-3s, so we had 18 at training, and that's the way the first 20 minutes of the session ran. And then when I went into the planned specific coaching of, say, the block or the jump and catch or fundamental movement skills, whatever it was that evening, the engagement was absolutely brilliant, because they'd already got what they came for. They got their match, the 20 minutes were done, they were probably a little bit tired, so they were probably less energetic for messing. And another knock-on effect of starting the game with the session, instead of the children turning up at possibly 5 past 6, kids were starting to turn up at 10 to, I kept that going for the rest of the year. Kids started turning up at 10 to 6 and 5 to 6, because they knew the sooner I come to training, the more game time I'm going to get. So that was a brilliant knock-on effect. So it's something that probably everyone could look at, is you don't always have to start with your drills, you could start with your games as well. Another thing then is probably for our 14s or 16s or minor coaches, having our position-specific training. So with regards to, especially if you know you're coming up to a game, you want to be able to make sure that your midfielders are training a certain way, your inside forwards or backs are training, so that the training is specific to them. So if you want to work on that, you need to probably plan with it as well. Next one then is perception action coupling. So it's basically just a fancy way of saying, once you're able to do the skill, are you able to do it in a match type environment? So the example, I know I've seen a brilliant thing on Twitter. Seamus Byrne, he's in Wexford. he was coaching the ruck ball with garden hoses out in the lawn. So we had 2 garden hoses 5 meters apart. So rather than just like a lot of the stuff on Twitter, practicing the roll lift with no opposition or no pressure, he had his teenage son roll lifting the ball, but the garden hose was basically imitating 3 or 4 or 5 other players trying to get the ball with their knees and their hips and their hurleys in the way. So trying to get the ball up with the obstacle of the hose. And I thought it was a brilliant way of making it more difficult for players that might find the actual skill very easy without pressure. Another thing we do with our under-12s at the moment is we have an individual skills box in the training. So if we have 17 kids at training, 2 4v4 games are set up, and I'm pulling out. So I've brilliant help before assistant coaches. So it can be done when you have the help. They're watching the teams and the games going on, and I'm pulling the kid out one at a time for 2 or 3 minutes, asking them what skill they want to practice or work on. We'll give them a little challenge, so whatever it's going to be. So say it might be dummy solo, and we give them a challenge for 30 seconds. How many can they do? And then we'll say, okay, I want you to practice that for a week now, and then come back and see how you get on.
Keep attendance, so what's measured is managed. So when we know how often people are coming to training and that, it gives us the opportunity, I suppose, to manage what their program is, and to be able to talk to them. Be a magpie, so pick up everything that you can, no matter where it's from. So as Michal was saying, he got stuff from swimming, he's got stuff from football, from hurling, from soccer, from any coaches that you come in contact, regardless of the sport. It doesn't really matter. A lot will apply across the board to our own sport. So when we're in conversation, and whether it's at work talks or whether it's at sporting talks, or that there's multiple opportunities for us there to broaden our horizons. So that's what he means there by being a magpie. Use your wisely. Yeah.
Can I come in on that? Guys, that's how every coach in the country learns. You go to a workshop, you go to a training session, you go to the coaching conference, a GDA comes out and takes a training session, and you might spend an hour, 2 hours traveling to a workshop. You might spend an hour and a half watching a coach, and all you might pick up is one game. And you might say, geez, that's an hour and a half at a trainer to pick up one game, or 2 hours down to Mallow to watch a coaching conference. All I picked up was one game. But it's those one games added on top of another game that you stole from somebody else, that you saw on the website. They're the games that give you the confidence when you go to the field. Yes, I know what I'm going to do tonight. I'm not making it up on the spot. I'm down there 30 minutes beforehand because tonight's session is going to be really, really good now. I really have confidence in what I'm going to deliver tonight. I'm getting down there and putting my pitch, lining out my pitch. Players are going to come and see everything is lined out. These games are fantastic, and you're going to give you the confidence to go to the field and deliver a training session. Every single coach learns this way. You pick up games from somebody, you copy what somebody else done, you steal an idea, and you put it all together, and you start to build up your coaching ideas. Okay, so that's a really, really important point there about being a magpie. Okay, Sean. You there, Sean?
Yeah, so I suppose the other points then, the last 3, so use your warm-up wisely. Okay, simplicity is complicated. The hardest part is knowing how to keep it simple. So I suppose by that we're basically just saying, use your, like my hall is saying, use your warm-up wisely. So get them active, get them engaged, get the players, I suppose, practicing, participating inside in the game from the very off, and then it helps then as your session goes on. Other ideas, skills of the week homework. So if you're involved with a child team or a youth team, there might be a specific skill that you want your players to upskill in, and then what you do is that you send them home for a week, and you might pick out a few of them to test them the following week, or you might have a general test if you have enough help for all of them to see how they're coming along. And I suppose most importantly, challenge and fun games to be incorporated into everything. So yes, our players are there, they want to have fun. The most important thing is that they are having fun, but at the same time we want them to be challenged when they're in training. So Michal, I see you're back in. We're just on the final point there regarding challenge stroke fun games incorporated if you want to take over.
Perfect, thanks Sean. Sorry, my fucking Wi-Fi went down. I was talking for the last 5 minutes and didn't realise it wasn't even on. But the challenge in fun games are incorporated. Where I got that from was before I started with Clare, I was working above in Lee Mellows, so it's a club inside in Galway City. And with regards to under sixes, with the girls especially, we did duck, duck, goose at the end of every session for 5 minutes. Now, I wouldn't be a huge advocate of duck, duck, goose because most players are sitting down and it isn't the most active of games. But what they were all doing is they were all cheering each other and their friends on, and they absolutely loved the game. So if it means to give away 5 minutes of your session for something that has absolutely nothing to do with hurling or football, that could possibly be the best 5 minutes you could give to the session as well, because Pat Daly at the National Coaching Conference saying that the only KPI that matters is keep people involved. So if you spend 5 minutes at your duck, duck, goose or whatever it might be for your team, it could be the best 5 minutes. It could be the best 5 minutes you could do. So then the very last thing then we're going to look at is the planning of the season. So what I want to look at is breaking it down into the O2 model. So we've got the O2 model, which is technical proficiency, tactical prowess, and team play. And then it's the psychological focus, playing facts, and physical fitness. So breaking it down into technical, tactical, physical, and psychosocial. So technical is that it's age-appropriate skills and they're technically proficient. How technically proficient are your players? So what are the skills that your players need to do at whatever age group it is? And then you want to be able to say, okay, well, what skills are there? So open skills are skills that are performed in the game. So most of the game is performed against opposition. But then you do have situations where you have your closed skills. So the example for these would be your kick-outs or your puck-outs, your sideline cuts, your free taking, and your penalties. So being able to do skills where you have all the time in the world to get it right. Next thing then we're looking at the technical elements is the different types of practice you can do. So like we were saying earlier with the drills versus the games. Distributed practice is something that you do little but often. So working on the skills little and often, but not necessarily focus on one in particular. And then your mass practice would be if you're trying to learn a new skill for the first time. So say the example would be blocking in football or hurling. Doing 3 or 4 weeks of very specific work on blocking because it is a hard skill to learn, and then being able to then, okay, how at the end of that 3 or 4 week block, then how can I try and incorporate it into my games with my skill points or anything like that. So then the next, a lovely quote I came across from Liam Morgan, who used to be the head of Sport Ireland coach education. He said, from chaos comes order. So we're trying to create players that are able to perform skills in a chaotic environment. And yes, order is important, but at the end of the day, they're playing in chaotic situations. So learning the skills in isolation is good, but then it's how can I transfer them skills that I've learned into my chaos situations, which is my matches or my games. The next element then is the physical side of things. So you're looking at your, for your child, it's your fundamental movement skills. So agility, balance, coordination, running, jumping and throwing, catch, pass, strike and kick. So these are the things that need to be developed in children that if they were done well, then it'll build on, it'll give them the chance to be successful for sport life. Okay, so we know that children that are more proficient at fundamental movement skills are more active in later life, and the kids that aren't proficient in fundamental movement skills are more likely to drop out of playing. But this is really important for us. If we want to keep our players involved, we need to develop these skills at the time that they need to be developed, which is in the child age group between 6 and 12. The physical components then for youth or adults is a little bit different. So it's our award. It's our youth coach and our 5 S's model. So our speed, our strength or power, our stamina, which is our endurance or our fitness, and then our suppleness, which is our flexibility or mobility, and then sleep. And then a big thing I added that isn't one of the S's is nutrition. So teenager boys or girls are growing at a rate that they'll never grow at again. So having a good nutrition, good solid nutrition when they're growing at their max gives them the chance to develop to what they could possibly be. Next one then is tactical. So we don't have much tactics for children. So children come to the pitch and it's me and my ball, and they're not too much concerned about anyone else. And then So the big job for the coach here is trying to get players, our children, used to us and our ball. So we've gone from a stage of where it's my ball, and now we want to learn that I share the ball with my friend and they'll share it back with me. So this is, if you got this by 12 with children, that would be just brilliant. And then another quote I came across that I really like with regards to tactics. I keep 6 honest serving men. They taught me all I knew. Their names are what and why and when, and how and where and who. So when we're trying to develop players, we want to develop tactically aware players that are really good at making decisions. So making players that are really inquisitive, that think about the game, is a really good thing for you to do with regards to tactics. So what type of pass will I do? Who will I pass to? If I was to do it again, what would I do differently? So making players think about what they're doing with regards their decision making is important in games. And then the last one then is the psychological and social elements of planning your sessions. So I know all this presentation, a lot of it was looking at how can I make my session so that I can be as effective as possible. But the huge thing about coaching, and it's one thing we should never forget, is that coaching, you're dealing with people all the time. So trying to build that connection with people is absolutely crucial. So the connection is the first thing you're trying to develop with your players. I know my players and they know me. So you're trying to make them want to come to training, and if you're connected with them, they're more likely to do that. Every child, all they ever want is to feel like they're loved and belonged. So once they know that that is there, that they're more likely, they feel like this is the place for them. You're trying to develop confidence and competence. So a huge thing with confidence and competence is the challenge needs to, going back to our challenge and support, the challenge needs to be achievable and not too difficult, but it needs to be just hard enough so you find that sweet spot where players can develop in a way that it's not too hard for them, but it is a little bit difficult, but with practice I will get it. The next one then is character. So we want to develop players that have good character, that will be good people down the line. And then the last one then is compassion or caring. So one of the nicest quotes I've seen about this is, and it relates to probably all the best coaches that I have had over my life. Nobody knows how much you know until they know how much you care. So yes, it's really important that, and I believe this, that planning makes all this possible. But it's really important not to forget that you are dealing with people, and you can be, sometimes we may be overly worried about the what we're doing rather than the who we're coaching. So a big thing for us is that we're able to do that. We are looking at that. So that is the presentation. There's just a group of, I know I was saying at the start of the presentation that there's a lot of people that know an awful lot more than me that have contributed to this presentation, and very little of it is mine. It's just compiling it all together. So I'd just like to thank all the different people that are on it, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation. And if there are any questions, put them into the chat.